Poverty in Africa, guys, is no laughing matter. It's the heart-wrenching absence of essential human needs for millions of people across the continent. You know, African nations have a bit of an ironic reputation. They're blessed with abundant natural resources, yet they somehow end up suffering at the bottom of economic activity lists. But why is this happening? Is there a curse of poverty in Africa or something? Join us as we unravel why Africa is doomed to stay poor. According to the United Nations Human Development Index, a staggering 22 out of 24 countries are deemed to have low human development in sub-Saharan Africa in 2009. It's as if Africa is that underrated band in high school that have talent but they never quite got the recognition they deserved. Fast forward to more recent times, in 2019, a staggering 424 million people in sub-Saharan Africa were living in severe poverty. You might think, wait, that number doesn't add up. And you'd be right. The following year, the world tossed in a global pandemic and a dash of conflict, leading to an extra 36 million people falling into extreme poverty. COVID, you really suck, each and every one of them. Now, before you blame it all on the mysterious workings of fate, let's examine the vicious cycle that seems to have Africa trapped. You see, 34 out of 50 nations on the United Nations list of least developed countries were right here in Africa back in 2006. With GDP per capita remaining at less than $5,200 per year in many African nations, it's no wonder the majority of the population is scraping by on far less. But as you know, every field has exceptions. Seychelles, the island nation in East Africa, cracked the code and is living life in the fast lane with a GDP per capita above $10,000 a year. Seychelles, you sly devil. Now, let's get down and dirty with one of the underlying issues holding Africa back from its true potential: land ownership, or should I say lack thereof. You see, despite vast stretches of fertile land below the Sahara Desert, small individual landholdings are rare. The land is often tied up in tribal ownership, plus freehold land owning is like a rare species. It's almost impossible to find in some places. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, laws in certain nations prevent disadvantaged groups from owning land altogether. Even though some laws are conveniently ignored and land sales to disadvantaged groups do happen, but the legal title to the land is always just out of reach. Therefore, rural Africans find themselves stuck in a tough spot, working as farm laborers with no real claim to the very soil they till. You might be thinking, why not use all of that unused land lying around? Well, the catch is much of that land is privately owned, with the poor land registration systems in many African nations. No wonder squatting and land theft are more common. The result? Getting a mortgage or loan becomes about as probable as winning the lottery twice in a row. This land ownership predicament isn't just about Europeans versus Africans. It's like a twisted game where one native African group has a secret advantage over another. Take Zimbabwe's land reform, for instance. It was supposed to transfer land from European landowners to family farmers, but instead, it merely swapped out one privileged group for another with ties to the government, leaving the majority of the population still disadvantaged. Now, you might be wondering, why hasn't foreign aid done much to improve the situation? Great question. But it seems like many aid programs have an idea for focusing on cash crops and large plantations, as if Africa were one giant monopoly board and they were trying to accumulate properties. Meanwhile, the small family farms are left in the dust. It's like buying up hotels while leaving the little greenhouses struggling to survive. How's that for a strategy? Making matters worse, here's a bitter pill to swallow. Over $500 billion in direct aid was sent to African nations, but the long-term impact has been disappointing to say the least. And you won't believe where a large chunk of that money ended up. It was found that most of it was invested in weapons. In what? I mean, what was the government thinking? The worst part? It was also misused by corrupt governments, leaving many democratic nations burdened with debt run up by previous totalitarian regimes. With debts rising and social services left neglected, including education, pensions, and medical care, the situation looks bleak. Capital flight from sub-Saharan countries further drained resources, totaling a staggering $700 billion from 1970 to 2008. Debt relief is sought, but it often avoids the neediest, leaving the burden to weigh heavily on their shoulders. Another wild reason is that large sums of money that are in Africa are often used to develop mega projects instead of smaller-scale initiatives, leading to missed opportunities. For instance, let's count on your fingers. Ghana, once the richest country on the continent, saw its foreign reserves vanish due to investments in ill-fated ventures. Second, the Akosombo Dam was meant to power aluminum extraction but ended up processing ores from other nations due to low-grade local resources. Third, cocoa storage silos were constructed for price fluctuations but now sit empty, as unprocessed cocoa doesn't store well. Similarly, the Aswan High Dam blocked the Nile's natural flow, hindering Egypt and Sudan's modernization by disrupting their natural supply of nitrate fertilizer and organic material. Moving on to another mind-boggling puzzle which somehow curses the Africas with poverty. This continent is blessed with abundant rivers and freshwater lakes, but struggling to find a drop of clean, potable water. Quite the conundrum, wouldn't you say? Ah, colonialism, the gift that keeps on giving. Well, problems that is. It focused on connecting coastal regions with internal territories, resulting in a lack of meaningful connectivity between Africa's roads and railways like a tangled mess of earphones in your pocket. Many transportation systems have received little to no development since colonialism's end, leading to further setbacks in maintaining roads, railways, ships, and ports. And with the lack of sewage system and potable water, waterborne diseases haunt the continent, hitting infants and children hardest. AIDS grabs headlines, but malaria, tuberculosis, tapeworm, and dysentery quietly claim more lives, especially among the young. Polio's comeback is like a bad movie plot, fueled by misinformation in Nigeria. But when it comes to war, Africa seems to be one of the unfortunate headliners, and not in a good way. It's like they can't seem to find peace. Some countries like Somalia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Rwanda have been dealing with these issues for a while now. Let's go back in time when Africa was divided up by European countries in what we call the scramble for Africa. It's like a race to grab as much land as possible. But here's the problem. The borders they drew didn't consider the different ethnic groups living there. After they left, African leaders kept those borders, but that caused even more problems. Now, things have gotten even more complicated with religious conflicts. Two groups, Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, are causing a lot of trouble. They do terrible things that hurt people and make the situation even worse. You would think with all this chaos there wouldn't be any money left. But surprise! The military forces seem to have plenty of funds for good equipment. It's like they've got a hidden treasure chest while the rest of the country struggles to get by. Talking about war and terrorism, they don't just hurt economies, they cause a lot of damage. In Africa, these things mess up the roads and buildings that were already not so good. They also shut down the government, making things even worse. And you know what? Many people are forced to leave their homes during these conflicts, not just running away, but being made to go far away from dangerous areas. Some of these people find new homes in places like Germany, Canada, and the United States. But guess what? The ones who can leave are usually the smart and skilled ones. It's like losing your best players from a sports team. Now, the people left behind become refugees. They go to nearby African countries that are peaceful, but these countries already have a hard time taking care of their own people. Imagine inviting your neighbors to dinner, but you barely have enough food for your own family. It's tough for them to handle all those extra people. After a civil war, everything goes wrong. The government services stop working. And when there's a fight, it messes up the trade and economy. In Sierra Leone, for example, they rely a lot on diamonds for money, but the fighting messes up the diamond production, making it less and less. On top of that, there's a secret market for diamonds that come from conflict areas, and this makes the prices go down for the diamonds that are still there. Despite all the difficulties, Africa has a way of showing strength and courage. It's like they're the underdogs, but they keep fighting for a better future. Among all the chaos, there are people working hard to bring positive changes and make things better. What do you think? How can we encourage investments in African industries to create more job opportunities and boost economic growth? Any ideas? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Till then, thank you for watching.